Florida Gators fans, I will be right. I will be wrong. But as always, I will be honest. And I got to tell you, I'm not feeling too good about this game against UCF.
You are Locked On Gators, your daily podcast on the Florida Gators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Locked On Gators, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day, we are available daily and free wherever you listen to podcasts and on YouTube. I am Brandon Olsen. Today's episode of Locked On Gators is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And like I said, I've been wrong. Obviously, the Miami game, I don't think anybody's ever been more wrong than I was for the Miami game. That's not true. There were people that thought Florida was going to win that game in a blowout. I thought Florida was going to win a close game. But I have been right before, like the Texas A&M game and the Mississippi State game. Samford, I guess we'll say as well. But I don't feel good about this UCF game. Like I said, I've been right. I've been wrong. I will always be honest here. And UCF is one of those teams similar to Texas A&M where I don't think there's a big talent difference. However, I do think that schematically UCF just matches up well against Florida, specifically looking at UCF's offense, where we've kind of learned, hey, as long as you are a physical, creative, wide run game, you're probably going to find some pretty decent success against the Florida Gators defense. And so far, that's been true. Samford was just outmatched, but they still had a little bit of success at times. Texas A&M, Mississippi State wasn't even creative, wasn't even fun, wasn't even exciting, explosive, wide, but they were really effective against Florida. And that's obviously a big cause for concern when you're facing UCF, the number 2 rushing attack in the country, and the only team ahead of them is a full option team in Army. Yeah, UCF offensively, scheme-wise, they are a lot of fun. Genuine. I'm going to be honest about it. I like scheme. I'm a scheme nerd. They're fun. Okay. They're really creative. And that's a bit scary at times when you look at what this Florida defense has done. I think that UCF's run game, they have some effectiveness between the tackles and really kill you out wide. I think that's a big part of it of, hey, yeah, we might just be picking up, 4 or 5 yards when we're running up the middle with Penny Boone or with KJ Jefferson or with anybody that they might put in there, because they kind of use a good amount of running backs. That's a thing that Gus Malzahn's always going to do, so that's not surprising at all. And of course, KJ Jefferson is their quarterback. Florida Gators fans, you may be familiar with him because last year he was Arkansas's quarterback. And obviously, they had some pretty good success against Florida last year. Arkansas won in the swamp. So this is also an instance where we can't go, this guy's never played in the swamp because, well, UCF's starting quarterback, which is the only position that matters mostly for, has done that. KJ is still KJ Jefferson. He's very inaccurate as a passer. I don't even want to say very inaccurate as a passer. He's very inconsistent as a passer. I do think that it's weird. He can get the ball far downfield, but he's not been able to generate the same kind of zip we saw in years past this year so far yet. Like the UCF or the Colorado game, he had an ugly pick in the end zone where it looked like he was throwing to the DB. It was bad. It was just ugly. There were some pretty ugly moments there for KJ. The game wasn't great for him in general. But his big selling point isn't, his passing ability. It's his run game. Like, he can just bowl dudes over. Even in the Colorado game, he runs for a touchdown. He pump fakes to RJ Harvey, and he just bowls over the DB into the end zone. Like, KJ Jefferson's legs are a huge threat. And it's not just like oh, he scrambles and run. No, they have designed runs for him. And they know that, hey, our offense is at its best when we use those designed runs for KJ Jefferson. When we just let him go, hey, line up, power read, line up, whatever read you're running, and let them run it. Or just straight up let KJ Jefferson run the ball. QB power is going to be a thing that you're going to see. And I promise you, KJ and Gus are in these meetings this week going, Gus is looking at KJ like, hey, man, I saw what you did last year. We got a much more creative run game here. You might not have to throw the ball a single time. And KJ is like, yeah, man, I might not. I've met the huge majority of their team, and I've bowled them all over. Like, I can do that. Everyone gets involved in this UCF run game as well. Like, it's not just KJ. It's not just RJ Harvey. It's Penny Boone. It's Miles Montgomery. I was going to say it's Xavier Townsend, but he actually, news came out last night, I guess, at this time of release. Came out last night that he was redshirting for the remainder of this season, which is wild to me, considering he was a starting receiver. He just wasn't getting a ton of production, but he was still a starting receiver on this team. But prior to that, he was a part of the run game. So at least there's that. It wouldn't shock me if they just handed the ball to someone else. I mean, UCF has good athletes out there, so wouldn't shock me if they just went, hey, this receiver, Kobe Hudson. I don't know. I know Kobe Hudson's their actually good wide receiver. Trent Whitmore's out there, former Florida Gator, whoever it might be. They've got Chauncey Magwood's pretty good in college football 25, so there's that. But it's a creative run game. It's an effective run game, and there's going to be a good bit of pullers in this rush attack for UCF. They do it in general, but I'd imagine that Gus, being the good run game schemer that he is looking at this Florida defense going, they're really bad when opposing teams pull anybody. Let's pull. Let's be creative. Let's exploit them, because Gus will do that. And again, I've said this before. If I'm Gus Malzahn, I'm smelling blood in the water here, and I'm taking my shot. We'll talk about that a bit later. As far as taking a shot, the passing game for UCF, it's very, how do I put this? It's very college. There's a lot of underneath catch and run opportunities and then deep shots, and there's not a ton of the intermediate stuff, which works, right? Especially when you have an offense like UCF's where it's like, yeah, we run the ball a lot. We have a quarterback that struggles with some accuracy. So you know what? We give him the easy throws underneath, quick hitters, and then we take play action shots. And that's a lot of what our offense looks like. And that's a damn good approach. I'm not trying to be like, oh, UCF's this amazing team. I don't think that they're that amazing. I think that their approach is very college friendly. And I think their approach is really effective when you're facing a team like the Florida Gators that have been bad at defending those kinds of offenses. Like looking at, when I was watching UCF's offense prior to, these games during the bye week, I was watching their offense. But when I was watching the UCF offense, I watched the Colorado game, which is by far their worst game. I watched the TCU game. Watched a little bit of the New Hampshire game, which obviously was more so just to see what they look like when they're running the ball against a team that they're way better than. Colorado is the only team that stopped them on the ground at all. And I don't think Florida is going to do that. There's no reason for me to think Florida can do that. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later on. Now we have to talk about UCF's defense. And again, this isn't tomorrow. We'll talk more about how to attack them and exploit them. But just looking at UCF's defense, we'll talk about that next on Locked On Gators. Hey, NFL fans or MLB fans, if your team is still in the postseason, sorry, Astros, you can start the season with a big return or end the season, MLB, with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. You get a hunch in the middle of a game. You see a lefty reliever warming up, and you go, Francisco Lindor's due up. I think I'm going to bet him to hit a home run in this next at-bat. You could do that on FanDuel. And if you haven't used FanDuel before, you can get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. put 5 on the Lindor home run. Cashes, you get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed, and the cash doesn't cash, you're still walking away with $200 in bonus bets. Say it's FanDuel.com. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day, every day. We are available daily and free breakfast in the podcast and on YouTube. And UCF's defense is interesting. I will say this first off, the thing that popped off to me the most when watching them, and I don't think he's this amazing player, but Lee Hunter, number 2 on the defensive line, if he's lined up over Damian George at right guard, I think Lee Hunter's going to have a little bit of a pretty good game over there. I'm just going to be honest with you. I think Lee Hunter packs a lot of punch, or has a lot of pop in his punch, I guess we'll say, to use a more football-friendly term, but packs a lot of pop in his punch. He was against Colorado. He pushed their right guard kind of right back into Shedeur Sanders, not literally into him, but right up in his lap, basically. And so when I look at Florida's offensive line and I say, all right, well, Damian George, he's been better this year than previous years. He's still not been good. I look at that and I say, all right, well, that's an area of concern for me, looking at what Lee Hunter can do, looking at what someone like Malachi Lawrence can do, who I think he's got a legitimate NFL future. Again, down the line, obviously, like I said, NFL future. Don't think he's draft eligible this year, or I don't think he's going into the draft this year. I expect him to come back for another one, but we'll see. Nigel Kelly, former Miami Hurricanes over there. Isaiah Nixon doesn't play much, but one-time Florida Gator commit is over there as well. They've got some dudes on this UCF team. That's how I'm going to put it. Some dudes. Again, I really like what Lee Hunter did against Colorado. I think for the most part, played a pretty good game considering their defensive line is funky. I want to say funky is a good word to use. And by that, I mean, like, you'll see a lot of looks from this defensive front of UCF. You look at, again, let's just go Colorado. Like, let's just go with the most recent thing that we've seen from UCF. And you look at the Colorado game, and they start the game, I'm pretty sure it was a penny front, which means nose tackle, head up on the center. They've got 2 3-techs, and they've got 2 5s or 9s, whichever way it works out there. And that's their setup. Like, they've got a penny front there. You don't know who's coming. You don't know if it's a blitz or if someone's dropping back, because they will drop guys back into coverage. That's a thing where you've seen it. Honestly, UCF might be more egregious with their dropbacks. Like I've seen defensive tackles drop back for them. And I mean, like, straight up defensive tackles, nose tackles. And I don't think we've seen that from Florida yet this year. Not that we ever want to see that, but I don't think we've seen it from them yet at this point. And I think that we've seen that from UCF. So they're going to be more creative with things. Again, it's like a one-off thing. It's not going to be something that you see frequently, but it's something that they've done, something that you should probably be somewhat expecting of, just with defensive linemen dropping back into coverage in general. Again, they don't do it as frequently as Florida does, or for a better term, as egregiously as Florida does. So it's not that egregious, but they will be dropping people in the coverage. They'll be blitzing anybody. I saw against UCF, against Colorado alone. I remember, I forgot what number it was, maybe 3 on their defense was like lined up over the slot and blitzed. I think he also had a pick as well, if I'm not mistaken. But UCF's defense, not bad. It's weird. Again, it's a weird look. They're going to play a lot of zone coverage. So I do think that when you look at that and you go, hey, offensive line, if you can genuinely hold up in pass pro, because UCF's not going to be blitzing the lights out. They're just sometimes sending a slot, sometimes sending the corner here, sometimes lining up a linebacker at the slot and blitzing him for some reason. I don't understand that one. Seems counterproductive to line him up there and then blitz out. It's just a weird thing. But they'll be doing those things, but they're not going to be crazy blitzing. Like, they're not going to be sending 7 every play or 6 or anything like that. In fact, there's sometimes where they sent 3 and one of them looked like he was like kind of rushing. Weird stuff. But when you look at that UCF defense and you say, okay, Florida's offensive line, if you can hold up, let's say Lee Hunter, the guy that I was talking about 2 minutes ago, let's say he's over Damian George, Jake Slaughter's helping him. Whoever's at left guard is handling Ricky Barber on his own. And then you've got the tackles handling the edge rushers there, maybe a tight end helping on one side there, probably on Malachi Lawrence. But you got that set up. You can kind of say, hey, they're sitting in zone. Like, Grant, attack it. Take what's there. That's the 6th-year starting quarterback thing. That's the 6th-year senior approach of they're going to be sitting in zone coverage. Take what's there. That's the thing where we look at it and we go, okay, like this is the kind of game where Graham can move the ball pretty consistently on his own. Like if they're sitting in zone coverage, just if you have your protection set up properly, just take what's there and allow catch and run opportunities. Not expecting to see Trey Wilson this week, but we do know that he returned to practice on Wednesday. So again, I don't expect him back this week, maybe next week against Tennessee though. But yeah, so he returned to practice, but you'll see the penny front from UCF and you'll see this. I don't know the actual name for this, so I apologize for that. But you'll see sometimes they'll have 2 down linemen, like just let's say one's over the left guard, one's over the right guard, or one's in between the left guard, left tackle, one's over the right guard. And then you'll have like a stand-up edge rusher outside the right tackle, and that'll be their look, which I will say this. If they come out in that look and you don't run the ball, I will be very upset with you. If they come out with 3 guys on the line of scrimmage, 2 linebackers behind them, and then a bunch of DBs, and you don't run the ball, I will be very upset with the offensive plan there. We've also seen that same look from UCF defensively, but they'll have a middle linebacker come down between the 2 defensive linemen. And so you've got 4 guys on the line of scrimmage. They could all be rushing. 2 could be dropping back. 1 could be dropping back, whatever it may be. But you'll see some pretty exotic looks from UCF. I don't think they're great looks, but you'll see some pretty exotic looks up front from UCF. That's going to be interesting seeing how Florida handles those. When you come out in penny, are you keeping a tight end, running back? What's the plan? Because if they're rushing 5, like one of the benefits of penny fronts, which are more common in the NFL, I believe, than college, but those kind of penny fronts where it's a 5-3-0-3-5, as in 5 tech, 3 tech, 0 tech, 3 tech, 5 tech, or if there's a 9 and there's a tight end, whatever. The point of that is if we're all rushing, then we've got one-on-ones across the line, and it's just one guy has to win. That's the thing about a penny front. You're really exotic, really crazy. We're just bum rushing you. And again, if one guy wins his one-on-one, you're screwed. So keeping a tight end in or a running back in, good plan. Like these are things where I think you can look at this UCF game and see, hey, they're giving us exotic fronts. How is this team handling them? And it's just, again, I mean, most of us are on the same page of fire Billy Napier. But it would be nice to see something positive from a coaching perspective there. And on a not so positive note, we are heading to the prediction portion of this next on Locked On Gators. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day. Every day we are available daily and free release in the podcast and on YouTube. Now, let me see what the current line is, because it shifted a lot. Florida opened as 2.5-point favorites after their Mississippi State game. And then after UCF Colorado, Florida was still 2.5-point favorites. And then it kind of felt like people started talking about Florida being 2.5-point favorites, and the line just started shifting over, despite UCF coming off a loss where they looked worse than they've looked for their entirety of the season prior to that. And despite Florida not showing anything new, but it shifted, right? And so what started with Florida as 2.5-point favorites at home over UCF is now UCF as 2.5-point favorites on the road at Florida, which is a wild thing. It's not a complaint at all. I want to put that one out there. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying it's wild to see. And I'm afraid I have some unfortunate news for my fellow Florida Gators fans. I am taking UCF to win, and I think I'm going to take them to cover as well, cover the 2.5-point spread, which means if you're not a gambling degenerate like myself, which means that you think UCF wins by 3 or more, which is what I'm going to take. I hate saying this, but this is genuinely going to probably be the approach that I take every week until Billy Napier is fired, until there's some significant coaching staff changes. I have no confidence in this Florida Gators coaching staff. And I especially have no confidence in year 3 of this Florida Gators coaching staff. I have no confidence in them suddenly figuring out how to stop the run. It's a thing that they really haven't been able to do against anybody. But it's something that they've been especially bad at this year and last year. And again, I look at this similarly to that Texas A&M game. And I'm not saying that UCF and Texas A&M are the same team talent-wise. I think Texas A&M is a better football team than UCF there. However, I am talking about when you look at the run game scheme and the creativity and getting the ball to playmakers in space in the run game, letting them get wide, letting them attack you there. And I look at what Texas A&M did with Marcel Reed as their backup quarterback that kind of got the starting nod a couple hours before the game when Connor Wigman was officially ruled out. And I look at what Texas A&M did, and it wasn't like Texas A&M was ripping off these insanely long runs. Like, I'm looking at the numbers right now, and Texas A&M had 3 guys with 10 carries or more. One had 18 carries and 2 had 13 carries. They all averaged over 5 yards per carry. None of them had a carry longer than 31 yards. Le'Veon Moss had a 27-yard run. Amari Daniels had an 18-yard run, and Marcel Reed had a 31-yard run. However, of those, 44 carries, they had 9 of them go for 10 or more yards, which is like, if you can get a quarter of your carries to go 10 plus yards, that's really good, right? That's really good. And that was the thing that we saw a lot. Le'Veon Moss ran for 5 first downs. Amari Daniels ran for 5 first downs. Marcel Reed ran for 6 first downs. Emmitt Smith Jr. ran for 2 first downs. Noah Thomas ran for a first down. They ran for 19 first downs against Florida. They didn't throw the ball in the fourth quarter. Like, they ran for 19 first downs. They completed 11 passes. 7 of them went for first downs. This was a Florida Gators defense that went against a Texas A&M team that, again, I think Texas A&M is better than UCF. And again, somewhat similar run scheme, just in the sense of being creative, getting wide, having pulling players in front, using multiple guys to attack you in different angles, that kind of stuff. They were better than Florida. They were better than UCF. It's not something I have confidence in, because just, again, it's not even as simple as, oh, they were just better. It's that they schemed up things to create big runs, and it worked consistently. It wasn't like they were ripping off 80-yarder and 75-yarder, and there's a couple of back-breaking things. No, it was just that they kept churning and picking up first downs and running the football and picking up first downs and churning away and killing you and killing you and killing you. And it's what happened against Texas A&M. That was 3 weeks ago, as in when we get to Saturday, it'll be 3 weeks ago. I just can't sit here and go, oh, I'm really confident in Florida's ability to make such a drastic change from not being able to stop Texas A&M and then giving up 240. They gave up over 300 rushing yards against Texas A&M and then gave up another 240, 250 against Mississippi State. That's bad. Then that's something to be worried about. And so until this coaching staff shows me competence, yeah, I'm taking UCF to win and cover this week. Unfortunately, against the Florida Gators. Thanks for making Locked On Gators your first listen of the day every day. We are available daily and free where listen to the podcast and on YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Talk more Florida Gators football. For Locked On Gators, I'm Brandon Olsen. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at WNS_Brandon. Find all my written work with Giants Country. I'll see you all next time.